My name is Sarah, and I'm 38 years old. Life has always been fairly calm. I've been married to my husband, Jack, for almost 10 years. We don't have children, but we've managed to build a comfortable life together. Things weren't always perfect, but they were steady. That is, until we moved into his family's old house. It seemed like the right thing to do at the time. Jack's parents passed away, leaving behind the large old house they had lived in for decades. Jack's sister, Laura, lived in another city, and Jack thought it would be best if we moved in to keep the house in the family. I wasn't completely sold on the idea, but I didn't argue. We were saving money, and Jack loved the house he grew up in. In the beginning, it was peaceful. The house was spacious, and it felt like we had a fresh start. Jack was grateful that I had agreed to move in, and he became even more attentive and loving. Everything seemed to be going well, but then small, unsettling things started happening. It began with Jack's sister, Laura. She hadn't visited in years, but now that we were living in the house, she suddenly decided to stop by more often. At first, it didn't bother me. Laura was friendly enough, but there was something off about her behavior. She always made these snide comments about the house. "You know, this house used to be spotless when Mom lived here," she said one afternoon, running her fingers along the edge of the table as if checking for dust. "I guess it's hard to keep up when you're not used to such a big space." I forced a smile. "It's a lot of work, but we're managing." Laura's visits became more frequent, and with each visit, her remarks became more cutting. "Sarah, you really should be more careful with the furniture," she said one day, pointing at a small scratch on the dining room table. "This table is an antique, after all." I was beginning to feel uncomfortable in my own home. Every time Laura came over, I found myself walking on eggshells, afraid she would find something else to criticize. Jack didn't seem to notice. He was just happy to have his sister around again, even though I could sense that something wasn't quite right. Then, one evening, something strange happened. Jack and I were sitting in the living room relaxing after dinner when we heard a knock at the door. It was already dark outside, and we weren't expecting anyone. Jack got up to answer it, and I followed close behind, feeling an uneasy chill in the air. When Jack opened the door, a man stood there holding a clipboard. "Good evening," he said. "I'm here to deliver some boxes." "Boxes?" Jack asked, confused. "We didn't order anything." The man glanced down at his clipboard. "This delivery is for Laura. Is this the right address?" My heart sank. Laura hadn't mentioned anything about sending boxes to our house. Jack looked just as puzzled as I felt. "Laura doesn't live here," he said slowly. The man shifted uncomfortably. "Well, the paperwork says this is the correct address. I have a whole truckload of items for Laura. Should I bring them in?" Before Jack could respond, we heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. I turned to see Laura stepping out, her face bright with excitement. She didn't look surprised to see the delivery man. In fact, she walked right up to him with a smile. "Perfect timing," Laura exclaimed. "Go ahead and bring the boxes inside." I stared at her, my mind racing. "Laura, what's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, didn't I mention it?" she said casually. "I'm moving in." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Moving in? She hadn't said a word about it during her previous visits. Jack seemed equally blindsided. "Moving in?" he repeated. "Why didn't you tell us?" Laura shrugged. "I figured it would be fine. After all, this is my family's house too, isn't it?" I felt my chest tighten. This was the house Jack grew up in, but we had been living here for months now. It was our home. How could Laura just decide to move in without asking? Jack and I exchanged a glance, both of us unsure of what to say. The delivery man, oblivious to the tension, began unloading boxes from the truck and carrying them into the house. I watched in disbelief as more and more boxes piled up in the entryway. "Laura, we need to talk about this," Jack said, his voice firm but calm. Laura waved him off. "We can talk later. Right now, I need to get settled in." And just like that, she was inside the house, giving orders to the delivery man as if she had every right to be there. I stood frozen, feeling a sense of dread settle over me. This wasn't just a visit. Laura was planning to stay, and it didn't seem like she had any intention of leaving. That night, after Laura had gone to bed in one of the guest rooms, Jack and I sat in the kitchen, trying to make sense of what had just happened. "What are we going to do?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Jack rubbed his temples, looking as exhausted as I felt. "I don't know. She's my sister, but she can't just move in without telling us." The days that followed were a blur of frustration and confusion. Laura acted as if she owned the place, moving her things into every available space and rearranging furniture without asking. I tried to keep my cool, but every time I walked into a room and saw something had been moved, I felt a surge of anger. It wasn't just the physical changes that bothered me. Laura's behavior grew more erratic. She started making strange remarks about the house, as if she knew something we didn't. "This place has always had secrets," she said one afternoon, her voice low and ominous. "You'd be surprised what you can find if you look closely." I didn't know what she meant, but her words sent a shiver down my spine. I began to feel like I was being watched, even when I was alone in the house. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind outside made me jump. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Then, one night, everything came to a head. Jack had gone out for a work event, leaving me alone in the house with Laura. I tried to keep myself busy, but the uneasy feeling that had been growing inside me was impossible to ignore. I kept hearing strange noises, footsteps, faint voices, things moving when no one was there. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but then I heard a loud crash from upstairs. My heart raced as I ran up the stairs, fearing the worst. When I reached the hallway, I saw Laura standing in front of one of the guest room doors, a look of panic on her face. "What happened?" I asked, my voice shaking. Laura didn't answer right away. She just stared at the door, her face pale. I don't know," she whispered. "I heard something inside the room. Something moved." I felt a cold knot of fear in my stomach. "What do you mean something moved? There's no one else in the house." Laura shook her head. "I don't know, Sarah, but this house, it's not what you think it is." Her words hung in the air, and I felt a sudden urge to leave, to get as far away from that house as possible. But I couldn't move. I was frozen in place, trapped by the growing sense of dread that something was very wrong. Laura turned to me, her eyes wide with fear. "You have to believe me, Sarah. This house isn't safe." Before I could respond, the door to the guest room slowly creaked open. I stared in horror as the door swung wide, revealing nothing but darkness inside. "I told you," Laura whispered. "There's something here." My mind raced as I tried to process what was happening. Was Laura telling the truth? Was there something in the house? Or was this all part of some elaborate trick? I didn't know what to believe anymore, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't stay in that house any longer. I turned and ran down the stairs, not caring if Laura followed me. I had to get out, had to escape the suffocating fear that had taken hold of me. As I reached the front door, I heard Laura's voice behind me. "Sarah, wait!" I stopped, my hand on the doorknob, but I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I was too afraid of what I might see. "Please, don't leave me here," Laura begged, her voice trembling. For a moment, I considered turning back, but then I remembered all the strange things that had happened since Laura moved in. The boxes, the rearranged furniture, the cryptic remarks. It all added up to one undeniable truth. Laura was hiding something, and whatever it was, I didn't want to be a part of it. Without another word, I opened the door and stepped outside,